Now we're going to go over absolute value equations, but before we do, we need to understand what an absolute value is. So what does an absolute value measure? This measures the distance from zero. Now, distance is always positive. It doesn't matter if you take your car 10 miles to the store going forward or 10 miles in reverse, your odometer is still going to go up 10 miles, right? Distance doesn't matter. So it doesn't matter if you go from 0 to 5, that distance is still 5 units away. So the absolute value of 5 is 5. Or if you're at -3, that distance is still 1, 2, 3 units away. So the absolute value of -3 is positive. Ironically, a lot of times we understand this when we get the absolute value of -3 is +3. And then we'll come over here and say the absolute value of 5 is -5. The absolute value doesn't mean change the sign. It means whatever that number is, it's going to be positive because it's measuring distance and distance is positive. So example 3, solve each equation. Well, this one's very, very straightforward. We have the absolute value of x equals 8. What number can I plug into x to make this equal 8? Well, first we can have x is 8 because the absolute value of 8 is 8. Or we could also have x equal -8 because the absolute value of -8 is also 8. In MyMathLab, it's going to ask for the solution set. And here we would say that the solution set is squiggly brackets. You could say 8, -8 or plus or minus 8 with your squiggly brackets. We use our fancy squiggly brackets when we have a finite solution set. Okay, so using that same logic here as we have right here, to get this to equal 5, I could have what's in here equaling +5. The 2x plus 3 could equal 5. Or my other solution will be 2x plus 3 could equal -5. Okay, so let's solve these. Here we're going to subtract our 3 over to get 2x equals 2. Divide by 2 and we could get x is 1. Same thing here, subtract your 3. -5 minus 3 is -8. Divide by 2 and we get x equals -4. So when we plug these in, what do we get? When I plug in a 1, we have 2 times 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5, and yes, the absolute value of 5 is 5, so that works. When I plug in a -4, 2 times -4 is -8, plus 3 is -5, and the absolute value of -5 is 5. So when you plug them in, they both work. So the solution set is squiggly brackets 1, -4. Now I have a little note here, and this comes out so dark and I don't know how to get it to be lighter, but I do want this to stand out. We always need to isolate the absolute value before you make 2 separate equations. So what I mean by that is here we have just the absolute value on the left side equals 5. So this absolute value is isolated. But when I come here, now I have the absolute value plus 3. This is not isolated anymore. So before I make my 2 equations, I need to get this absolute value by itself. So we're going to subtract this 3 over to get the absolute value of 1 minus 3x equals 10. Now that this absolute value is isolated, now we can break it up. So my first equation is 1 minus 3x equals 10. And then my second one would be 1 minus 3x equals -10. So here to solve, we're going to subtract our 1 over to get -3x equals 9. and then divide by -3 to get x equals -3. So there's one solution. Here, subtract your 1 over. -10 minus 1 gives me -11. Divide by -3, and -11 over -3. Can't reduce those numbers, but negative over negative will make that 11 over 3. So the solution set is squiggly bracket, and that's a good squiggly bracket, -3 to 11 over 3. Okay, on D, can I go ahead and set this up into my two equations? Okay, hopefully you said no, because I have the absolute value plus 3. So that plus 3 is a problem. So we need to subtract that 3 over. I'm going to get the absolute value of t minus 4 equals -3. Now, that's a problem because we know that the absolute value is always going to come out to be what? Positive. So because this is negative, that's a problem. So I'm going to write in here. These are your notes. You can write whatever you want, but absolute values are never negative. So what does that mean? That means we have no real solution. There is not a number I can plug in for t that would make this equation be true, because the absolute value will never equal a negative number. So we have no solution, or I'm putting no real solution because I think that's what it says in your homework in my math lab.